Hey guys, it's Nicholas here. Do you want to know the only way you can succeed in the markets? Forget the systems, forget the strategies, forget the analysis techniques. Those all mean nothing without one critical factor: good decision making. Yes, of course, these other things are important, but there's this myth that gets floated around that if you have a good system, you don't need to rely on making the right decisions anymore because the decisions are just made for you. But that just isn't true. Ultimately, one of your main roles as a great trader is to make great decisions in the face of uncertainty, and that's no easy task. So in this video, I want to give you 5 practical tips that will instantly improve your decision making as a trader or an investor. And as we work our way through that list, if there's one thing in particular that you want us to cover in more detail in a separate video, just pause this video and leave a comment letting me know. And of course, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button if you find this video helpful at any point, as our videos do need a little bit of love from you guys so they can be seen by more people. But anyway, let's get started. Most people make decisions by focusing on the immediate outcome. For example, if I eat this McDonald's burger right now, this one right here, it will satisfy my immediate food cravings and I'm hungry. But people don't give as much thought to what the consequences are of that decision after the immediate outcome. What may happen next, or just over the longer term in general? Eating those McDonald's burgers might satisfy my hunger cravings in the short term and seem like a good immediate decision, but if I keep doing that over the long term, it could cause negative health effects. So to put it a different way, there are second order consequences of my decisions. Now, that McDonald's burger example is just a basic example, but when we look at complex decision making, the same is true in principle. And the people who outperform everyone else are the ones who are able to think in terms of second, third, fourth orders and beyond. Now, this is especially true in the markets. Most people will look at an opportunity as this sort of binary outcome. Either the price is going to move up or it's going to move down. Which one do I think is most likely? And that's where I'm going to be placing my trade. One direction is then in my favor and one is going against me. But instead, they need to keep thinking to themselves, and then what? So the price moves up or down after my entry. And then what? What does it mean? What could happen next? Rather than looking just at the immediate outcome, you need to see beyond that and think about what the immediate outcome will lead to. Sort of like chess players thinking about how their opponent's going to react to their next move and what that will lead to and where that leads to a bigger opportunity for them. So if you want to make better decisions, you need to be able to assess all the potential outcomes before you decide what to do. It may be that after assessing the outcomes, you make an entirely different decision than you would have done if you were just looking at the first immediate thing. You might change your plan of action because by looking at what happens next and next and next, you might see that there's actually a more favorable option for you. This reminds me of something I read from George Soros. Now, I know a lot of people don't like him, but there's still no denying that he's a fantastic trader. And he says that he doesn't call himself a securities analyst, he calls himself an insecurity analyst, because when he finds an opportunity, he feels insecure about it, no matter how good that opportunity seems to be, until he knows all of the different ways that it can possibly go wrong. And when he does know how it can go wrong, it doesn't mean that he avoids the opportunity. You know, he's not looking for the right opportunity where nothing could go wrong. It's just that when he knows everything that could go wrong, he's now prepared for it and he knows how to plan for it. He's incorporating second order thinking into his decision-making process, and he's then ready for all eventualities. And in fact, what you start to discover is that a lot of the time, the best possible decisions you can make will have a negative first order outcome, but then have a massively positive second order outcome. And that's the preferable situation for us. When we look at athletes, we can see why they'd want to take care of their body to get the best possible performance. It's like they're a machine. We know that what they eat and drink, how they train, how much rest they get, is going to impact how well their body can perform and ultimately lead to their success or not. Yet when we think about trading, most people just think about the intellectual demands and focus on doing things that improve their edge, such as learning or optimizing their system. And this is all meant to lead to them making better decisions. But here's the thing. Our brains consume 20 to 25% of our body's energy when we're at rest. That's not even when we're doing something that's cognitively demanding, just when we're at rest. And it's been found that elite chess players, and it's the second time I'm talking about chess players in this video, well, they can burn 6,000 calories a day just by sitting down playing chess. So what does this say about the brain's need for energy? And what do you think a trader will need to make the best decisions they're capable of during an intense trading session? They need more fuel for their energy guzzling brain. Therefore, I can give you no bigger piece of advice than to say that if you want to make better decisions, you need to fuel your decision making in the right way. When we're faced with uncertainty, like we are all the time in the markets, our brains will be making decisions whether we want them to or not, and whether we realize it or not. So the only way we can make sure that these decisions are as optimal as possible is if we're fully fueled. So this means 4 things, broadly speaking: eating enough and healthily, hydrating yourself well, getting the right amount of sleep, and exercising. So when it comes to sleep in particular, there's this fascination, especially in younger people and particularly with young men, to work around the clock. It's cool to be someone that never sleeps and just works. We live in this hustle porn culture that promotes working without ever resting. But if you do this, your decision making will deteriorate and your performance will be much worse. Not just a bit worse, but significantly worse. So getting the right amount of sleep is going to improve your decisions, and particularly when it comes to risk assessment and risk management, which is something we'll discuss in a separate video. But ultimately, we should be planning to fit our trading sessions into times when we're at our highest possible levels of energy and not when we're at our lowest, which is what a lot of people do. So if there's a way to move your schedule around to accommodate that, to make sure that you're trading at the times when you have the most energy, you will see an improvement in decision making. I know it's tough, especially if you work a 9 to 5, but I'm sure you can find a solution. Also, it might surprise you to know that exercise can help your decision making as well. Amongst other things, it influences the levels of neurotrophins, which are proteins that help neurons to function better. So this means that exercising will help you to make better decisions. And of course, all of these things, eating better, drinking more water, exercising, sleeping more, is all going to lead you to having a happier, healthier life and living with the best quality of life that you can have. So it's literally a win-win situation. There's no reason not to do it unless you're just being lazy. So stop being lazy. Alright, this one is a favourite of Charlie Munger, who is the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway and a 100% certified legend, I will have you know. So when we're making a decision in the markets, we're essentially trying to solve a problem. We don't know what's going to happen next in the markets for certain, but based on our analysis, we want to decide if we're going to take a position and what sort of position we should take. But if we can't predict the future, then how can we do that? Well, when we're faced with uncertainty in this way, our brain reacts in a funny way, and we'll discuss that some other time. But for some people, that feeling of not being able to be sure that you're making the right decision actually starts to become a fear. You even have some people that suffer from something called decidophobia. Yes, it's a real thing, Google it. This is where people live with this irrational fear of decision making. They'll avoid situations that involve making choices and let other people make decisions for them instead. Sort of like when I ask my girlfriend where she wants to eat and 3 hours later, we still don't have a decision or a conclusion to it all. So instead, a simpler way can sometimes be to use the inversion method. One aspect of this, or one way of doing this, is where we try to solve problems by starting at the end. In other words, instead of thinking about the problem from now and trying to solve it to get to a positive outcome, we invert it and start from the end. What would be the desired outcome? And then think, what decisions or actions would you need to take to achieve that desired outcome? Alternatively, if you're unclear about what the ideal outcome looks like or the steps that are needed, you can also take a different route of inversion instead. So rather than trying to decide what the right thing to do will be, simply think about what the wrong thing to do will be and then avoid doing that. So that means that we can sometimes make decisions and make good decisions based on trying not to do something bad. Because ultimately, if we can avoid all of the bad outcomes, what are we going to be left with? You're right, So, when you're making a decision in the markets, if you're stuck with the thought of what's the best thing I could do here, invert it and start by thinking, what's the worst things I could do here? And then work from there. It's just like what Charlie Munger says. It's remarkable how much long-term advantage people like us have gotten by trying to be consistently not stupid instead of trying to be very intelligent. All right, you still with me? Hit the like button if you're still following. This one is about to ruffle some feathers, so brace yourself. You see, everyone always says that you need to take your emotions out of the markets. Keep your emotions out of it. You need to learn how to be emotionally neutral, to trade like a robot. And in fact, I have to hold up my hands and say that I've also spoken about becoming emotionally neutral in the market, but I was wrong. There's a slight difference to what you should be doing. And I have to give credit to Denise Scholl for this one. She's a performance coach for hedge funds and the founder of the Rethink Group. And basically, we mistakenly think that emotions and taking actions based on those emotions are one and the same thing. But instead, they're actually two separate things if we can learn how to harness it correctly and separate the emotion from the action. So instead of trying to remove emotions from our trading, we need to learn how to use emotions correctly. You see, our minds are incredibly powerful and we're processing information constantly, even when we're not aware that we're doing it. And so emotions are providing us with some sort of data based on the information we're processing or from past experiences that we can relate to the current situation. Now, for some reason, we exclude this data and see it as being irrational. It's irrational to base something on emotions, while we think that our conscious mind is the rational thing to be following. But if we learn instead to listen to that information that's being provided to us and to find the source of it, we can use our emotions as data to help our decision making. Sounds crazy, I know, but as Denise Scholl says, we aren't wired to be irrational, we just misunderstand and misuse our wiring. So you want to make better decisions? Well, don't try to remove your emotions, just try to use them as a tool instead. And remember, if you want us to go into more detail about this one and explain how you can use emotions to your advantage, leave a comment below, or any of the other tips that you want us to go into more detail about. So most people that talk about using checklists with your trading are saying it so you don't forget to do things or to make sure that you're sticking to your system. However, checklists can also be used to improve your decision making in another way as well. This is something that was discussed by Guy Spear, and it also partly relates to the last point when we discussed emotions. So he points out that the markets trigger two parts of our brain. One part is the threat detection mechanism, which leads to a fight or flight reaction. Because when we see something that we fear, we don't have time to analyze and make a weighted judgment about it before we take action. We just take an immediate action to protect ourselves or to deal with the threat that we have there. And the other part that gets triggered is our irrational exuberance. And in fact, CAT scans have shown that even just the expectation of profits will light up the brain in a very similar way to when cocaine addicts think about taking cocaine or have taken cocaine. So I think you can agree, we're not going to be making the most rational decisions if we're in that state of mind. So Guy Spear argues that good decisions in the markets come from being able to operate in the middle of those two extremes. And he theorizes that Warren Buffett has been so successful because he's naturally able to stay in the middle of those two extremes. But the majority of us are not. We're not wired in that same way. So instead, by using checklists, it pulls us away from the type of actions we'd take if we're in fight or flight mode or in greed mode, and allows us to make decisions in the middle where things are much more rational. So it's not about having a checklist so that you don't forget to do things, it's about pulling you out of an extreme response in your brain that would cause you to make bad decisions. Now, of course, all of these things that we've been discussing are going to help you to make better decisions, but you still need great analysis to lead you to that point where you can choose what to do. And if you want to know more about how I do that using the Duomo method, then check out the free training that's linked in the description box below. But before you go ahead and do that, let's summarize first of all what we've just discussed. We had assessing outcomes using second order thinking or beyond, fueling your decision making with better nutrition, sleep and exercise to feed that energy hog that you've got inside your head, using the inversion mental model to avoid decidophobia and to attack your decisions in a different way, using your emotions as a data set of their own, and finally, using checklists to drag you back to the middle, away from the extremes that contribute to fear and greed. Now let me know in the comments which point you found most helpful or most interesting, and which one you'd like us to go into more detail about in a future video. I have a feeling I already know which one most people will be most interested to hear more about, but as always, I'd love to hear from you. And if you found this video helpful, hit the like button, and you know the real best decision you could make is to subscribe to the channel. So please do so. All right, thanks for watching. Hope it was helpful. Take care. I'll see you in the next one.